Good morning once again, everyone. I'm Carolyn Gusoff. The time right now, 7:31. And yet a sixth juror took the stand late in the day. The judge granted Frank D'Angelo's request that our cameras not photograph him in court. It perhaps shouldn't surprise anyone that we found more shoppers at a mall on Election Day than voters at a polling place. When police arrived to investigate, they found all along this stretch piles of cracked corn. Corn, they say, was poisoned. There has been so much talk of tragedy here today, but there has also been talk of miracles. The fact that nobody on the ground was killed and that so many people on the plane did manage to survive. And of course, federal investigators will also be looking into that. Not only the cause of the crash, but what made the difference on the plane, why some people lived and other people died. In Cove Neck, Carolyn Gusoff, News 12, Long Island. There are more than 350 people here to listen to what the governor has to say, each with a different agenda, each with a different wish list of sorts for the governor. There are educators here looking for a change in the way the state handles aid.
Scott and Melba, with the defense calling none of its own witnesses in this case, some court observers thought it would be a very quick verdict, but not so. This jury has asked for several things today. They've asked for fresh air, first of all. They took a walk earlier this morning. They've also asked for some of the brochures that the Long Island Pet Cemetery sent out to customers. And they asked for the testimony read back to them of one of the Long Island Pet Cemetery workers, a worker that testified about Sam Strauss's involvement. This jury appears to be in no rush.
News 12's Carolyn Gusoff is standing by in Riverhead now with the outcome. Carolyn?
Bill, it was a very tense day from the beginning when the jury sent a note to the judge saying they wanted to hear his instructions read back to them, and then just a few hours later they sent out their final note. They had reached their verdict.
How do you find that Christopher Loliscio has to count one of the indictment charging murder in the second degree? That is intentional murder. How do you find the defendant Christopher Loliscio? We find the defendant
Members of Christopher Loliscio screamed as the jury foreman said what had been their worst fears: guilty of felony and intentional murder, and guilty of rape of Jessica Manners. Loliscio had maintained that he had merely had consensual sex with the 14-year-old girl, and that someone she met later in the night killed her. Apparently, the jury didn't believe that. As friends of the Manners family said thank you, Loliscio family members yelled, "You've been bought," and "Sleep well" to pale-faced jurors. Christopher Loliscio simply turned to his family and said, "I love you, Mom." For another family, at the end of a tragic chapter which began Easter Sunday, 1989, when their oldest daughter was found dead.
He's been convicted. And never will mother and father sit in those same seats and relive their daughter's murder 1,000 times over. Not from this man.
But for another family, the system has failed. For those who still believe Christopher Loliscio is innocent, the tragedy has just begun, and there will be an appeal.
Well, I'm very, very saddened by it. I believe that an innocent man has been convicted.
Sentencing in this case is set for December 18th. The victim's family, in the meantime, is asking that letters be written to the judge asking for the maximum sentence. Meanwhile, the defense says it goes without saying that there will be an appeal. In Riverhead, I'm Carolyn Gusoff reporting. Let's go back now to you in the studio.
Our Carolyn Gusoff is standing by now in Washington with details on this long-awaited report. Carolyn?
Scott and Melba, it was not a flaw in the system. It was human error which caused the crash of Avianca Flight 52. Today, the National Transportation Safety Board put the responsibility for that disaster right in the hands of crew members who failed in the tone of their voices and in the words they chose. They failed to convey to air traffic controllers the grave situation they were in. After 15 months of investigating, the 5 members of the National Transportation Safety Board adopted its staff report, agreeing that the crash of Avianca Flight 52 was caused by the errors and omissions of the airline pilot and first officer.
The flight crew failed in 2 major ways. They failed to manage their fuel, and they failed to communicate to air traffic control that they had an emergency situation.
The crash was obviously caused by a lack of fuel, but the NTSB concludes there was a litany of mistakes which led to this disaster, beginning with the crew never asking for an updated weather report, and problems in international terminology, and congestion over the New York sky that put Avianca in holding patterns for 77 minutes, depleting its fuel, plus poor pilot performance and fatigue, which caused a failed first landing attempt. But the crucial mistake, according to the NTSB, was never declaring a fuel emergency. The plane's first officer had only told air traffic controllers the plane was low on fuel, but never in a tone or language that declared an emergency.
Running out of fuel, requesting priority, having 5 minutes more to hold, cannot make my alternate. I think you're being even more explicit than just saying the word emergency. You are indeed, in a common sense way, conveying what's happening to you. I think that should have been an understanding.
At least one NTSB board member agreed that too much emphasis is being put on the pilot's mistakes. Avianca was also the victim of a backed-up flow system, which diverted 26 other flights that rainy January night, and air traffic controllers who did too little too late, according to this member.
We have a litany of mistakes and missed possibilities on the part of the crew here, and it's I don't think it's quite fair to recite all of that and not also point out the ways in which the air traffic services did not come up to par.
But the majority of the board agreed it was the Avianca crew which dropped the ball. The board came up with 24 conclusions, which suggest that no one thing alone would have prevented the crash. It was a series of mistakes which began in Bogota, when the crew failed to get an updated weather report, and continued throughout the flight, throughout their many holding patterns. But their fate was sealed when they missed their very first landing attempt at Kennedy Airport. National Transportation Safety Board members say even then, had they used the proper terminology and declared a fuel emergency, at that point, it probably would not have made a difference. In Washington, Carolyn Gusoff, News 12, Long Island.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hillary Rodham Clinton doesn't exactly stump for her husband. She runs for First Lady. Her days are stuffed like this one with extemporaneous speeches, live television appearances, radio interviews, and that's all before breakfast. It's a grueling pace and an equally relentless assault on her and, by the way, her husband's opponent.
You know, George Bush was elected in 1980 by saying, "Read my lips," and running negative Willie Horton type ads. And we all woke up the next day and did not have a clue about what George Bush believed about all the major issues facing America, because we didn't have an election about them. We didn't know what he'd do about jobs or education or children killing each other in our schools. We didn't know those things. It turned out George Bush didn't know either.
An accomplished and articulate lawyer with a high-powered resume, 44-year-old Hillary Clinton is winning admirers who say she could win more than that.
It's a shame that she's not running instead of her husband, because I think she comes across more believing and more acceptable than her husband does.
I've heard her give 2 talks at Hofstra today. Each of them has been different. Each of them has been without notes. Each of them has been more substance than one has ever heard George Bush put together in hours.
But for all their admiration, the crowd was rather lackluster. Many students here at Hofstra will be voting for the first time next week, and like public opinion polls have indicated, many are dissatisfied with their choices.
I don't see anybody out there right now that I'm willing to vote for.
I don't think we have a lot of good choices right now.
But Mrs. Clinton is unruffled by the criticism. She's been busy campaigning lately against an elusive opponent, her husband's knack for landing in controversy.
Scrutiny is always appropriate when someone's running for president, but I don't think anyone has ever been subjected to the barrage of untrue and false charges that my husband has been.
With only a week to go till the New York primary, it's doubtful the stabs and scrutiny will let up. In fact, Hillary Clinton says she's not waiting for the other shoe to drop. She says, "I expect they'll throw the entire shoe store at us." In Hempstead, Carolyn Gusoff, News 12, Long Island. Sandra Petty used to edit stories at Newsday. Now the same hands that spent hours at a time at a computer cannot even turn a doorknob or hold a dog's leash. She suffers from repetitive strain injury, RSI, and has been out of work on disability for a total of 16 months.
I'm in pain all the time, and I have great difficulty writing. If I hold a pen, I feel pain. Sometimes it causes shooting pains up my arms. I cannot drive. I can't type.
No one knows exactly how many people on Long Island suffer from RSI, but at Newsday alone, more than 250 people have filed workers' compensation claims related to RSI. And several workers have filed lawsuits against computer keyboard manufacturers. But it's not only a problem in newsrooms. RSI is a condition familiar to butchers and cashiers and all other workers who repeat the same hand motion hour after hour. It's a far cry from simple writer's cramp and usually not acquired from just working on a typewriter, where most people take breaks, even if it's just to put a new piece of paper in. Victims say it's the non-stop ability of the computer that leaves them unable to do any hand motion without severe pain.
At my worst, I had my wrists immobilized. I was out of work for about 4 months.
H.J. Cummins, a business reporter at Newsday, used to work at a computer 8 to 14 hours a day.
I, for example, left work because I didn't have the strength, and the pain was too much. I couldn't even get dressed anymore.
The Long Island chapter of the Arthritis Foundation is in the midst of forming an RSI task force, the first of its kind in the nation.
We don't really know how many people have RSI right now on Long Island or the rest of the country. We'd like to try to get some better estimates on that. Secondly, to really study the science behind it now. What is known medically about repetitive strain injury and the components of it? And third, what kinds of things can we really do?
Preventing RSI, which could involve simple hand stretches and work breaks, may be easier than finding a cure. Just ask Sandra Petty. Therapy 5 days a week has only brought some improvement.
When I went to from being able to lift 5 ounces to 12 ounces, it meant that I could have a can of soda, which I couldn't have before.
Carolyn Gusoff, News 12, Long Island. In a community already on edge from a string of suspicious fires, the latest blaze is fraying nerves. 2 people, residents of this boarding house, are dead. 5 firefighters and 1 police officer are injured. And the question heard most often, why is Sayville burning? So far, fire officials believe this fire was a tragic coincidence, accidentally started in an upstairs bedroom of one of the boarders. Still, it's a cruel reminder of the destructive power of fire in a place where no one needed one.
Everybody's concerned that this is happening not once, not twice, but many times. So, you know, people generate thoughts and try and piece together things, and, you know, hopefully we're going to come up with somebody. I don't know either.
In a hamlet of just 13,000 people, 7 fires since Christmas are causing alarm. The first burned this house under construction to the ground. A week later, almost to the minute, fire broke out behind this pub. Then on January 19th, 3 fires on one night landed this arson suspect in jail. But the fires didn't end. A January 27th blaze cost 2 lives, and another one on February 1st is suspicious. Everyone has their own theory and their own fears.
After all, we've had a number of fires now that are a bit suspicious. And even little children, I know my granddaughter, for an example, is a bit scary at night. She's wondering whether something's going to happen to her home.
When you have mass destruction like this, there's a lot of people in the community that get concerned, that get very concerned.
The fires have at least temporarily changed the lifestyles of many business owners here on Main Street. They're taking their files home at night. They're checking their stores at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and they're sleeping very lightly.
You don't know if your place is going to be next. Everybody's hanging out at night, taking turns on night patrol.
But it's too late for precautions for residents of 29 Green Avenue.
It's really sad. They're just like wandering around now.
Arson or not, it's adding fuel to the fire of fear. In Sayville, Carolyn Gusoff, News 12, Long Island. His hair is shorter and he's lost weight. Otherwise, John Gargano appears to be the same animated orator he was when he preached at the Eternal Tabernacle in Islip. Only now he's preaching his innocence, claiming he was crucified in court.
I was convicted before I hit that trial, and everyone knows it. The publicity that I got, like someone called me up and said, you got more publicity than Richard Nixon got.
This is Gargano's 3rd week in the maximum security transfer center, 2 months after being convicted of the rape, sodomy, and sex abuse of 3 teenagers in his ministry. Prosecutors had painted a picture of a man who used the pulpit to get sex and who likened himself to an angel to control the minds and bodies of parishioners. But Gargano says his accusers are liars, the children of scorned women who engineered a plot to do him in. The motive, he says one of the women made it very clear.
I know it's about money. I know. I was sat down in 1989, February, and told, give me the houses, give me this, and I said no. It says, I'm going to give you more trouble than you know what to do with.
Gargano says none of that came out in his trial.
Why, every time my attorney put in an objection, it was always overruled.
Gargano believes his 3-week trial was flawed, with questions unasked, like why the victims waited so long, up to 6 years, before accusing him.
Every one of the accusers knows in their hearts that they lied, because they've already said it to different people. They didn't think it was going to go this far.
I'm asking about you, though.
No, I did nothing that I was accused of, and I got nothing to be ashamed of. They said I was the angel Gabriel. I said I was the angel Gabriel. That's the biggest lie in the world. I've never said that. I've never told anyone I was an angel. God forbid. Me, an angel? Do I look like one? Do I act like one? I'm an angel?
Whoever he is, he's 67 years old and has an 18 1/3 to 40-year sentence ahead, but doesn't believe he'll live out his years behind bars. Gargano hasn't given up on his case, and he hasn't given up on the pulpit either. He says he's preaching to other inmates here in jail, telling them never to give up hope. Apparently he has, and he believes if the courts don't settle the score, God will. In Fishkill, Carolyn Gusoff, News 12, Long Island.